Okay, welcome back. My name is Derek Main, and I review translated literature. So today, I'm going to review Mac's Problem by one of my favorite active writers, Enrique Vila-Matas. This is released by New Directions. It's translated by Margaret, Jull, Costa, and Sophie Hughes. And in order to review this book, I think we need to talk a little more broadly about Enrique Vila-Matas overall. So, there's three other additional books we're going to kind of talk about of his. They're all released by New Directions, so I'm just going to tell you the translators on them. Montana's Malady, which is Jonathan Dunn translation. Bartleby and Company, also a Jonathan Dunn translation. And then finally, The Illogic of Castle. I'm going to go with Castle. And this one is translated from the Spanish by Anne McLean and Anna Milson. So, why are we going to talk about these other books? Because Enrique Vila-Matas is a very particular kind of writer that I think is reaching for a couple of large questions about the nature of literature, and more specifically, who we as readers are and why we are, maybe who writers are and why they are. And I think you'll see just through the plot points why they're connected. This book right here is, I think the term that he uses is, someone struck by literature sickness. This is kind of a father-son story. The father is the narrator. Montano is the son who's just written a book. And the narrator is obsessed with literature in a way almost to his detriment. I mean, he is sort of confusing life and world literature as he goes about this story. Okay, so that's the plot here. Then we have Bartleby and Company, which is entirely told in footnotes, but what it is this narrator's cataloging of all of the writers who chose not to write. So think, like in America, J.D. Salinger, right? Like famously, quit writing. He goes through a ton here. Some that never wrote anything. Some that wrote one or two things, why they quit. And I think through why they quit, he's also getting at why they wrote in the first place. What is it about silence? What is it about the literature of no? So one of the things that both these books have in common is there's obviously a ton of literary references, particularly in this. Many of them are true. Actual writers, actual novels, poetry, plays. Some of them are not true. They don't exist. And then there are plenty that are so obscure that honestly it would take hours and probably a better understanding of Spanish in my case to find out if they are true or not true. Some of the anecdotes seem maybe true, maybe, not true at all. But it's very interesting because one of the things that we do when we want to read about writing or read about literature is we want to hear a great story, a clever story. And in this way, the truth of the matter, it's kind of more fun to see someone build up this mythology mixed in with truth. So that's what he's doing here, and in a different way here as well. Now, I'm going to get to this one in a minute, but let's go right to what the newest title is. So this is his latest work, Mac's Problem. So you remember the two plots we just discussed? The plot of this is a middle-aged, maybe 50-something man, Spanish man, who's been recently laid off from sort of a middle management job, and he starts keeping a diary. He's obsessed with literature, of course, right? He's obsessed with writing, yep. He's also very much obsessed that his diary will not become a novel. This is a big focus. This is just a diary. His wife believes he's kind of going crazy. His wife is probably right. He runs into a neighbor who is a famous writer, of course, right? And someone that he's known, it seems, throughout his life. Someone that he feels very connected and also disconnected from. And so he starts rewriting all of that famous writer's stories. And this is the way in which Mac is going to deal with middle age, fear of dying, fear of obscurity, fear of loss, in this case, the loss of the stability of his former life. And things are going to get very twisted in his head when it comes to what is literature and what is reality. What am I writing? What is actually happening? What have I read? And what is true? So I think you can see that these two are very, very connected. This is very connected. We have a writer here that is obsessed with literature, the way that a lot of us readers are obsessed with literature. So that's why he's one of my favorite active writers. I mean, he's also a master. His words are incredible. He is deliciously funny. I mean, all of these books are sad. They are sad as shit. Honestly. Pardon my poor English. But within that sadness, there is a lot of humor, usually self-deprecating on part of the narrator. The narrators, even though these are very similar people, one of the things he does so well is the narrators do have different voices. They are, throughout the different novels, you feel like you're inside someone else's head. So that's going to bring us to this. This is my favorite title of his, The Illogical Castle. Again, I have no clue. This starts off, basically, the narrator of this is Enrique Vila-Matas. Everything about this book leads you to believe that it is autofiction or whatever that term we're using nowadays is. You know, that is just him writing exactly what happened. He gets a call from a strange woman, I think it's a German woman, who extends an invitation to dinner. And at that dinner, she says, there is this huge avant-garde art festival in Costa, which is a true thing. And we want you to come and sit in a Chinese restaurant and write all day. And that will be an installation. It will be an art installation. He accepts this extremely bizarre setup and then goes on his trip. But the story is really just being in his head the entire time as he experiences the most mundane things like walking around the city, as he experiences such bizarre things like going through an avant-garde artistic festival and all the sort of sights, sounds, emotions, but also just the absurdity that he feels himself in having to be kind of a person behind glass writing, and what that says about the audience's relationship to the writer that they want to see him create. When writing and creating like that is such a personal and lonely thing, you don't typically do it with other people. Well, that's the same thing about reading, right? Like, one of the reasons I want to make a channel like this, and I want to, listen to some literature podcast and be involved in BookTube, is that at its core, this thing that we love so much is isolating, right? We read alone. It's a quiet thing, and it's wonderful. It's the most amazing form of entertainment. I mean, I'm sure that when the radio came around, they said it's going to kill books. And then, of course, television comes around and says it's going to kill books. I'm old enough to at least remember when the internet came around. And again, it's going to kill books. Meanwhile, the richest person in the world and the most successful internet company and, pure evil started off selling books. But books go nowhere, right? There is still that community and that group of people who find it to be this perfect, exquisite form of entertainment. So while I'm reading Enrique Vila-Matas, a lot of times what I'm thinking about is why I love to read and why I love to delve into these worlds. I mean, I've got a TV in there. I could watch all the sports I want, all the movies, the shows. I've got the internet. We could go down 1,000 different conspiracy rabbit holes. You could sit on Twitter or Facebook on my phone and mess around all day. What is it that draws you to this? And I think the answer for everyone is quite different, but I thought about telling you mine because I think it is connected to Enrique Vila-Matas. I think it is connected to Mac's problem, and frankly, to Montano's problem. I have had debilitating panic attacks throughout most of my life since I was 12 or 13 when the first one happened. Of course, that comes tinged with depression and those kind of issues. And one of the things I've noticed is that during those times when things really flare up and they're really difficult to get a hold of and feel my own feet on the ground of reality, I'll think, I've only read 2 books this month, or I've only read a few stories. Sometimes as I move further away from this thing that I love, my own mind becomes so hyperactive and the narrator of my own thoughts starts going to all those dark places of death and inadequacy and insecurity. And what I love about this form of entertainment is that what you're doing as you sit there and quietly reading is you're letting another narrator come inside that head. And when you're dealing with a master like Enrique Vila-Matas, you're letting a narrator who knows exactly what they're doing and where everything should go and how the curtain should be drawn. And you're just letting that narrator flow through all of your thoughts. And you get to walk in those shoes, and you get to walk through the streets of Costa and go to this avant-garde art festival that you'll never be able to go to. And as you close the last page, you feel like you were completely there and immersed, and you got to do it with someone who, while some of their inner thoughts and private feelings may mirror yours, they are not yours. And you get to live in someone else's thought cloud during this time. And that's something that I think he does really very well, but he also is extremely aware of the danger of that. And that's where Mac's problem comes in. It's certainly where Bartleby and Company comes in, and of course Montana's malady. That's where the sadness comes in, right? Is that there has to be a balance in your life between being immersed in anything that you truly love or obsessed with, and also having your feet on the ground. Knowing that it's time for me to spend time with my children. It's time for me to watch a stupid football game. It's time for me to unplug from that reality of big ideas and sort of these deep thoughts by Jack Handley. That's an old crappy Saturday Night Live reference. But that kind of cloud of constant thought, and unplug it and go somewhere else for a while. At the same time, as I said earlier about sort of the anxiety and depression, if you go at that other place for too long, at least for me personally, my own narrator starts to move too fast, become too confusing, and sort of take me on a ride that I'm not ready for or willing to do. I want someone else to kind of come in and wash over me with their words. So kind of an odd review, but the truth is, Enrique Vila-Matas is not someone that I would, for even a casual reader, someone who read somewhat regularly, but was more maybe plot driven or New York Times bestseller list, even frankly from the awards list. Let's not talk about awards this week, but I wouldn't recommend, right? Because this is for those types of people who want to spend 20 minutes on BookTube listening to someone review a book. It is someone who is obsessed with literature, and that's what Enrique Vila-Matas, that's who I think he is, and I think that's who he writes for. And for that reason, it's a really delectable sort of guilty pleasure, in the same way that I still, when I want to have a cleanse, read like some David Goodis or 1950s, 1940s era noir, because I just want to dive into that nastiness. Here we're going to dive into an obsession that I have and that I share with someone, but in this case it's a master writer, and he's going to take me on a journey through his obsession that opens my eyes, opens my mind, and makes me feel less alone. Because that's what literature can do. It can make you feel less alone. And some of the people that quit writing in here, a lot of them, in fact, I would argue, started to feel too alone as they tried to put pen or typewriter to page to connect, because they lost that sort of connection with the audience, and so they shut it down. And it was the silence and the literature of no was actually about coming back into this world, being apart again, and not having that isolation. So anyway, those are my thoughts. That's my review. I think it's a very good book. It's not... Actually, I think this is where I would start with him. I was going to say I actually like it better than Montana's Malady. The Logic of Excel, as I said, it's kind of like its own standalone thing. You're just going to go with a writer to this wonderful place. It's my favorite of his. But yeah, I think Mac's Problem might be like a really good starting point. And Bartleby and Company is just so much fun. I mean, it's just fun to read, like totally these anecdotes and stuff where you're like, is this true? And then you start Googling and going through Wikipedia and you're like, maybe. I mean, there's not much info on this. I don't know if it's true. I like the idea that it's just like a passed down oral history amongst writers, booksellers, and publishers, like little gossip and rumors about like, this is what happened to this writer. This is why he quit writing. Anyway, I love it. So next up is going to be my next video, which I think will hopefully be later this week. I'm done with the book. I'm really excited about reviewing it. It is The Seventh Function of Language. And it is by Laurent Beignet, translated from the French by Sam Taylor. I gave a quick preview before my last video, or at the end of my last video, rather, about what it's about. But I'll tell you, I love this book, but it was very difficult for someone who is not very well-trodden in the language of semiology and, linguistics, I guess, in general. So we're going to talk about that. And this book is probably a little more accessible than maybe Enrique Vila-Matas, but I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time. Be good to everybody.